Good morning. Good to see you all. Welcome. Glad you guys made it this morning, braved the bitter cold. I've got 4 hose bibs out on my house, and I put a little drip on all of them, but one of them was frozen this morning. So I spent a few minutes trying to heat that up so I don't have frozen, bursted pipes. Hope you guys fared better. But I'm glad you're here. Isn't it nice to have a warm, heated building where we can worship God together? Speaking of worship, if I asked you a question, who do you worship or what do you worship, how would you answer that question? We're going to be talking about that today. But that reminds me of a story of when I had graduated college and was recently working at a church that I'd been part of as a college student, had my own office. And one day, Tony, he was the lead pastor of that church, he came in and he looked around my office and he said, "Hey, Kurt, if somebody who didn't know you walked in and they said, 'What do you worship?' what would they say?" And I got this kind of sarcastic smirk on my face as I looked around my office. And what do you think I had on my walls? Some of you guys know me. So I had a Purdue football poster. I went to Purdue University. We lived in Lafayette, Indiana, where the school is. I had a Purdue football poster and a Purdue basketball. At some point in my life, I'd acquired one of those fat heads. You know what those are? Giant stickers about this big. It was with a big Purdue football helmet. I had my little Glenn Robinson bobblehead doll. Anybody know who Glenn Robinson is? A few of you. The big dog, one of the best college basketball players of all time. Averaged 30 points and 10 rebounds this last year. Number 1 pick in the NBA draft, back before many of you were born. I was 7, so not that I'm that much older. I said sheepishly something like, I guess sports or Purdue sports. And Tony said, "Okay." And then he left. He didn't tell me what to do, but he just wanted to point out something. What does it look like that I worship? And I think that's a good question for all of us to think about. We're going to get at some of that today. Because we're going to see Jesus in the text that we're in, John chapter 9, if you want to go ahead and flip there. Jesus reveals himself to a blind man who he gave sight to. And that man's response is to believe in Jesus and to worship Jesus. It's a right and fitting response. We are in a series preaching through the book of John. It started last year sometime and might go into next year. I don't know. And we're just preaching through bit by bit. I am concluding chapter 9 today. This is the 3rd week we've been in chapter 9. We started off, Robbie, one of our a guest preacher, came in a couple weeks ago and talked about the first part of chapter 9 where Jesus heals this man's blindness. He is blind from birth. Jesus does a miracle to heal him and open his eyes and give him sight. And then last week, if you were here, we talked about and compared the blindness of the people to the sight of the man, where many were physically seeing, but they were blind to who Jesus was. And yet we had this man who was physically blind, is now physically can see, and also spiritually is beginning to see who Jesus is. And what does he do? He just says, "This is what I know. I don't know a lot about this guy, but I know I was blind, and now I can see." And so we're going to conclude this story today. Main point today is similar to as it has been over the last couple of weeks. Jesus is the Son of Man. Believe in him and worship him. It's what the story in John is here to do, to compel us to belief or to stir up our belief in Jesus, which should lead to worship of Jesus. So, John chapter 9. If you're not there, you can still get there. Grab one of those black Bibles underneath your seat. I want you to read, it's just a few verses, but I want you to read along with me. Before we do that, I want to give us a moment of silence to just take a deep breath. Probably close your eyes. Turn your thoughts and your attention to Jesus. And even maybe today, in light of what we're going to be teaching and what I'm going to be teaching and talking about, you can say, "Jesus, show me anything in my life that I worship that's not of you. Places in my life I still need to give over to you." And just give him this time as we teach. So let's do that, and then I'll read through the verses and I'll pray for us. So, moment of silence. John chapter 9, starting in verse 35. So remember, Jesus has healed this blind man. He's had all these interactions with a lot of other people, just questioning him. He gets kicked out of the synagogue, and now we pick it up in verse 35. Jesus heard that they had cast him out, and having found him, he said, "Do you believe in the Son of Man?" He answered, "And who is he, sir, that I may believe in him?" Jesus said to him, "You have seen him, and it is he who is speaking to you." He said, "Lord, I believe." And he worshiped him. Jesus said, "For judgment I came into this world, that those who do not see may see, and those who see may become blind." Some of the Pharisees near him heard these things and said to him, "Are we also blind?" Jesus said to them, "If you were blind, you would have no guilt. But now that you say, 'We see,' your guilt remains." Let me pray. Lord, thank you for this incredible story that you have preserved through the Apostle John, that we can read, that we can see, that we can believe, that we can rightly worship you. I pray that you would help me now as I preach to do so well, to do so truthfully according to your words. I pray that you would let your power and your spirit be at work in our hearts and minds, that people's faith and trust in you would be strengthened this morning. Amen. So we start off with, who is the Son of Man? Who is the Son of Man? At the beginning, we see in verse 35, Jesus hears that he got kicked out of the synagogue. He goes and finds the man, and he asks him this simple question: do you believe in the Son of Man? And so let's start here. Do you believe in the Son of Man? Now, most of us, I assume, are not from a Jewish background, and so we think, what is this? What does he mean, the Son of Man? A son of man? If you're a guy, then you are a son of a man. So what does he mean here? But the Jewish audience is immediately going to think about the prophet Daniel and something that he recorded and wrote down about 600 years before Jesus was alive. This term, the Son of Man, is something that Daniel had in a vision, and I want to read it for us today because it's probably helpful for us if we can understand who the Son of Man is, because Jesus is posing a question that we also should want to answer. Who is the Son of Man? So let's go to Daniel chapter 7. These two verses will be up on the screen, so you don't have to turn there. Now, Daniel was a prophet. He is having these visions as he is in captivity. The Jews have been exiled away. You might know Daniel for some of his more famous stories, like, defeating the lion as he prayed, and God saved him and rescued him. But Daniel had a lot of crazy visions, and chapter 7 is no different. There's lots of different visions that are happening, and we're going to zoom in on one of them here. So read it with me and try to picture this, what we read in Daniel here. So verse 13 says, Daniel says, "I saw in the night visions, and behold, with the clouds of heaven, there came one like a son of man. And he came to the Ancient of Days and was presented before him. And to him was given dominion and glory and a kingdom, that all peoples, nations, and languages should serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion which shall not pass away, and his kingdom one that shall not be destroyed." Okay, let's start with verse 13. We'll go to 14. So put 13 back up on the slide. So Daniel has this vision, and the clouds of heaven, here comes this one like a son of man. So there's this divinity, right? Because who walks on the clouds? So there's some level of this isn't something a mere human can do, and yet he's like a son of man. So there's human characteristics. So Daniel just says he is like a son of man. So human and yet divine. And he's coming on the clouds of heaven. He comes to the Ancient of Days, which if we read the verses before this, we can read about the Ancient of Days. This is a picture of God on his throne. Here's Jesus in the clouds of heaven, or just spoil it, I guess, but it's Jesus, right? Like a son of man coming and then presented before God on his throne. Now, Daniel describes in the next verses what he sees, what is being given to this Son of Man. Verse 14, he was given dominion and glory and a kingdom. He's given dominion, right? He is the ruler or the Lord over all of this. He is given glory, right? Honor and prestige, right? And that belongs to God. So if God is giving it to this Son of Man, that's pretty significant. And he's given a kingdom. Right? Jesus is the king. This Son of Man, this one like a Son of Man, is the king over this kingdom. He's the ruler of it. It says that all peoples, nations, and languages should serve him. Now, this is important because it's not just for the Jews. It's not just for the Israelites, but all peoples and nations will belong in this kingdom and will serve him. And the amazing thing about this kingdom, which is pretty cool, because Daniel is exiled, right? He is a part of the Jewish nation, the Israelites, and their kingdom has crumbled and gone away. And he's looking at this kingdom where it says it's an everlasting dominion. It's forever and ever. It will not pass away. It shall not be destroyed. It's a forever kingdom. A pretty cool vision. Now, Daniel, his response in verse 28 of these verses, I'll read it for you. It says, as for me, Daniel, my thoughts greatly alarmed me and my color changed. So Daniel is a little worried. He's terrified. Now, if we were to read all of chapter 7, you might see some of the other reasons why. There are beasts, there's terror, there's destruction, and there's lots of confusion in a crazy, unique vision like this. And so Daniel is a little confused. The Jews were also a little confused. There's this mystery of who is the Son of Man, right? That's the question Jesus asks. But they're eager and they're looking for it. And who is he? When is he going to come? What's he going to look like? What is this like? Now, Jesus asks this question, do you believe in the Son of Man? The guy responds, well, who is he, sir, that I may believe in him? And Jesus says, if I can paraphrase Jesus in verse 37, it's me. Jesus says, you have seen him, and it is he that is speaking to you. So Jesus is this Son of Man. Jesus is the Son of Man. This is a title not uncommon. Jesus used this over 80 times in the gospel, this title, the Son of Man, for himself, this messianic title. He's trying to use it to draw people's attention to say, I am that. I am Daniel's vision. Let me read a couple verses for you where Jesus does this, because it'll remind us of those verses in Daniel chapter 7. Matthew 25, verse 31, Jesus says, when the Son of Man comes in his glory, and all the angels with him, then he will sit on his glorious throne. And he's talking about himself. Later in Matthew 26, Jesus says, I tell you, from now on, you will see the Son of Man seated at the right hand of power and coming on the clouds of heaven. It sounds a lot like Daniel 7. Jesus is saying, I am him, I am coming, I will fulfill that, it's me. And so here's the good thing for us is we can see more clearly than what Daniel could see. Right? So picture this. This is Daniel over here. Right? About 600 years before Jesus. And he's having a vision into the future over here. The kingdom of God, the everlasting kingdom, one like a Son of Man, and Daniel's a little perplexed. But before this has come to pass, because it hasn't yet come to pass, Jesus comes and enters the scene. But in a very unexpected way. Right? Because the Son of Man and all his divinity comes in, he's a human. He takes on flesh. He's just like a regular Son of Man. And even more unexpected, Jesus dies, which doesn't make sense, because how can one who has an everlasting kingdom and a dominion that can't be destroyed, how can he die? Right? So it's this great mystery. It doesn't make any sense. He dies, but then he comes back to life. Right? Jesus came back to life. He resurrected again. He defeated death. He conquered it. And now he's enthroned in heaven. And so we can see more clearly, because Daniel, he's puzzled. And the Jews are puzzled. Who is the Son of Man? And Jesus comes and he says, it's me. And we're here. We're on this side of it yet, right? It hasn't happened yet. This kingdom has not come. Jesus has not come back. But we can see and know much more clearly. We know how the story ends, don't we? the Son of Man comes and he conquers. Jesus is enthroned in heaven right now, and he has dominion and authority over everything. And so what Daniel's vision is doing is it's pulling back the curtain. It's giving us some spiritual insight in ways we can't normally see. He's saying, it's Jesus. Jesus says, that's me. I am there. I am in heaven. This is encouragement for us now because the dragons of this world still rage, don't they? Evil exists everywhere. There is war and there is chaos, and we can find it in our city. We support a local Christian organization called Anew that helps women impacted by domestic sexual abuse and exploitation. In our city, happening on our streets, downtown and all other places in this city, in Gainesville, there's evil around it. We can look at our country and the world and the divide and the killings and the war, the chaos in other countries. There's chaos here, right? It's bad, and yet we can say, wait a minute, we know how this story ends. We have one who conquers. Jesus is reigning. We get this picture. The curtain is pulled back to say, this is how it's going to end. Jesus is invincible. His kingdom is safe. It is secure. And all his citizens, if you're one of his citizens, you can take heart. This is true. We are a part of his kingdom forever. We're just not there yet. But this is the King of Kings. This is the ruler of the age to come. It's Jesus. He's right here, the Son of Man. And so he asks this question, do you believe in the Son of Man? And we all must have a response. What is our response? For this man, he sees rightly, he believes in Jesus, and he worships him. We see the Son of Man, and we believe in him. And if you do, then you worship him. Let's go back through those verses. Jesus hears that he gets kicked out. He finds him and he asks him this question, do you believe in the Son of Man? Verse 36, the guy answers him, who is he, sir? He still doesn't know quite who Jesus is. Who is he, sir, that I may believe in him? Jesus says to him, verse 37, you have seen him, and it is he that is speaking to you. Now, this is minor, but I love this point. He says, you have seen him. And this is pretty beautiful and poetic because the man has not seen anything until today, literally blind from birth. And Jesus says, you've seen him. I just picture Jesus with a little smirk on his face, like, you've seen him. But you know, he's also not just talking physically, right? Because all the people around him are physically seeing him, physically hearing him, and yet many of them do not believe. And they've rejected him. So there's a spiritual element of what Jesus is talking about right here. You have seen and you're hearing him. And his response, verse 38, Lord, I believe. And he worshiped him. So simple, yet so right and so true. This is a right response to revelation. When Jesus reveals himself to you, you must believe in him and worship him. Now, what does this look like? That's what I've been asking myself. What does it look like? He says, I believe, and then it says he worshiped him. So what does that mean? Did he pull out a guitar from behind his back? All right, Jesus, I wrote this one for you. Right? Is that what worship is? Often we equate worship to the part in our service where we stand up and we sing together. And we use that word worship to mean that, but that is only a part of it. It's only a piece of worshiping Jesus. So he probably got down on his hands and knees like this. Maybe he put his face on the ground. I don't know if I can quite get there. That's probably what happened. When this word gets translated elsewhere in the New Testament, it can be bowed down, it can be prostrate, it can be lowered. Sometimes it's related to begging, right? This word means kneeling or prostration, to get down, to pay homage to someone. You're expressing respect towards them, or you're making supplication, right? You're asking for something, you're begging for something. It's a sign of showing someone who is of superior rank. In some cultures, you would get down and you would touch your forehead to the ground as a sign of an expression of reverence towards someone. You might even kiss their hand or kiss their feet. That's what means. That's this simple little phrase here. He worshiped him. That's what he means. something like that. Now, only God is to be worshiped. We're not to worship anything else. This was one of the commands. You shall have no other gods before me. And in Exodus 20, verse 5, this is one of the 10 commandments. It says, you shall not bow down to them. You shall not bow down to the idols or the images or serve them. Right? One of the commands is no other gods. Don't bow down and worship. And so this guy is, you'd say he's breaking commandment, except it's right. He's worshiping God. He's bowing down before Jesus. This is interesting. John is the writer of this book. John is in this scene watching this. Later, John will have his own revelations. He will write them down in the book we call Revelation. And at the end of Revelation, 2 different times, John falls down to worship someone who's not Jesus. Let me read one of them for you. This is Revelation 22, verses 8 and 9. I, John, am the one who heard and saw these things. And when I heard and saw them, I fell down to worship at the feet of the angel who showed them to me. But he said to me, you must not do that. I am a fellow servant with you and your brothers the prophet, and with those who keep the words of this book. Worship God. That happens twice to John. It's like he's not remembering this. He's not remembering the first time he bowed down and worshiped an angel. Right? We don't do that. We bow down and worship who? Jesus the King. We worship God and God alone. And this response by this man is right. If you believe, you must worship. If you believe in Jesus, you must worship. Does your life reflect worship of the Son of Man? Now, Jesus is not here, so we can't physically bow down in front of him like this man had that privilege and that opportunity. So what does this look like? I think it looks like this. We can say our whole life is bowed down to Jesus. Our whole life is worship of Jesus. If we believe, it leads to worship. And so we put everything at his feet. That's what worship is doing when you're bowing down. You're putting yourself at their feet. You are submitting to them. You are honoring them. You are lifting them up. And so our whole lives are this. Lord, everything is yours. I'm going to put everything in my life at your feet, under your rule, for your service, for your purpose. If you believe Jesus is the Son of Man, then you must worship him. So the question is, does your life reflect that belief? And for a lot of you, it probably does in many ways. And so part of my hope is to say, well, are there areas where you're bowing down at Jesus' feet, but you got some other idols around? They're not as tall as Jesus, sure, but you still worship them? Have you bowed down everything to Jesus? Maybe you can say it like this. Jesus, my fill in the blank is yours. Or how can I worship you, Jesus, with this part of my life? Because it's really obvious when he's here and you can just get down on your hands and knees and worship him in that way. But what about all the other areas of your life? You say, Jesus, my body is yours. Right? You might ask the question, how can I worship Jesus with my body? This made me think of Romans 12:1, which should be up on the screen. This is the Apostle Paul writing and talking about this, worshiping God with our body. He says, I appeal to you, brothers, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God, which is your spiritual worship. Paul's appealing to them. God's mercy has been good to you, so here's what you're to do. Present your body as an act of worship. Right? It's a sacrifice to God. You're laying it down for him. Why? In what ways? So that it's holy and acceptable to God. So God, is this a right way that you should use my body? I'm going to talk really simply about the worship, the time that we sing and praise God. I mean, that's a time Jesus isn't here, and yet we can still bow down in worship as we are singing him. You know, sometimes it looks differently. You might want to lift your hands or be more expressive. And I'm not saying it's going to look the same for all of us, but I want you to ask Jesus, how can I worship you with my body? So maybe today, as we sing, you literally get on your hands and knees and you bow down to him. Maybe it's another way that you could say, Jesus, even with my body, even something that might be uncomfortable, I'm going to show you, right? Because that's what this physical act of worship is doing when he's getting on his hands and knees. But it can be other ways. How do you worship Jesus with your body? Have you bowed down that to him? We can talk about the way we look or the way we dress. We can talk about what we eat and how we exercise, and maybe do we obsess a little bit too much about those things? And so those have become our God or our idol that we need to actually tear down because we worship Jesus alone. Right? Our culture worships sex. It worships partying and alcohol and drugs. Is that in your life? Would you say, Jesus, even that? Oh, Jesus, you can have most of my life, but I'm going to hold on to that piece? As Paul says in Romans 12, offer it as a sacrifice to God. You say, Jesus, what do you want from me? What do you have for me? I want to give my life and my body to you. What about our time? Right? Can you say, Jesus, my time is yours? Jesus, how can I worship you with my time? How do I bow down my time to him? Well, the good thing is you're here. That's a good start. Right? You can consider this an act of worship to Jesus. Jesus, I'm here. I'm gathering with your church. I'm gathering with your people. But if you use this couple hours a week and that's it, what does that say about your belief if your worship of Jesus just consists of a little bit of time here on a Sunday morning, maybe a couple times a month? What does that say about your belief? Maybe you are not submitting your time to Jesus, and I get it. You have a busy life. So do I. It's the culture we are in. Probably we all could benefit from going, man, do I worship these other things, or these, even if they're just little gods? And Jesus, you're the big God, but I got all these other things. I need to say, wait a minute, no, Jesus, I need to submit that to you as well. Man, you have no time for personal growth, time in community, serve at the church, serve people, serve your neighbors. There's lots of excuses we can make, and maybe it's because we've made an idol out of time that we need to bow that thing down to Jesus. Let me keep going. What about our money? Oh man, this is a hard one to talk about. We love our money, right? And it's my money, and I worked hard and I earned it. And yes, you probably did. But are you going to submit that to Jesus? I mean, this is one of the main idols that we see talked about in the Bible, is our love for money and comfort and stuff. So can you bow that down to Jesus? Or you say, well, Jesus, I'll give you a lot of things. Jesus, I'll even give you my time, but man, don't ask for my nice lifestyle. Right? If you say, Jesus, how can I worship you with my lifestyle? My giving, I give money to you, to your church. I help people that are in need. What do you spend your money on? Right? This is, you might think about your plans and your aims in life, and how am I spending my money, and why am I working so hard, and what am I grinding towards? Ask Jesus how he wants you to worship him with your money. For some of you, he might speak to you like he did the rich young ruler. He talks to a man who was very rich and wanted to follow Jesus, but Jesus perceived in his heart that this man loved his money. And so he said to that man, he said, sell all that you have and come follow me. The man couldn't do it. And Jesus might not speak that same thing to all of us, but if you ask him, you might see what he has to say about that. Couple more. And my intention here is just to stir this up. Okay, I love Jesus, right? He is the Son of Man, and I believe him, and I worship him. Okay, let me think about all the areas of my life and make sure that's bowed down to him. What about your past? This is something that I was thinking about this week. Past regrets, past mistakes, past hurts and wounds you have. Sometimes we hold on to those things, and they actually become a kind of God in our heart that we don't even realize. We get stuck. We hold on to that, and we're thinking, man, I'm just always going to be like this. It's always that way. But that's not true. Jesus made you a new creation. He saved you, and he will help you. You just have to let go of those things. Don't worship them anymore. But how about our future? Right, that was an easier one. Right? What might Jesus call you to? And will you submit your future over to him? Because Jesus, it's in your hands. Where you might ask me to move and go. Right? For some, he says, stay when you don't want to stay. For some, he says, go when you do want to stay. But will you submit that over to him? We say, Jesus, my life is yours. I will give you my future. Whatever it is with my studies, where that takes me, in my career, in my job. Jesus, you come first, and I want to worship you with everything. If you have anxieties about the future and your plans and your worries, you got to submit that over to Jesus as an act of worship to him. I want you to ask the Holy Spirit to reveal these things to you. He is the great convictor of sin. And if you have an idol in your life, something you worship that's not Jesus, that's sin. You need to repent of that and say, Jesus, I'm sorry. You alone are worthy of worship. And so ask him to reveal that you would worship Jesus alone because you believe in him, because he is the Son of Man. What parts of your life have you not bowed down to Jesus? And give those things over to him today. Because we remember who he is, the Son of Man, and what he's done. He has opened our eyes, spiritually speaking, to see him and believe in him, and so we worship him. This is what Jesus came to do, was to give sight to those who could see. Now, as he did so, some still rejected him. And we're going to see him kind of conclude this passage here. As he says, basically, I came to give sight, but also to reveal blindness. Let me finish with those last few verses. In verse 39, Jesus says, for judgment I came into this world, that those who do not see may see, and those who see may become blind. So Jesus is revealing a bit of his purpose in coming, but also in just healing this man. That this man who could not see would now see. He's pointing to how Jesus came to help the humble and the broken and the hurting, the downcast, those who are troubled, those who see their need. Jesus is here. But he's also here to show the proud that they're actually blind. Those who can see that would actually be blind. That's what he's describing. And that's what we see. If you read back through chapter 9, you can see the blindness coming out of the people who say, I can see, I can believe. Right? All these people who saw Jesus' miracles, they heard his teachings, they experienced him, but they rejected him. Some of the Pharisees must have been within earshot, because it says in verse 40, some of them heard him, and they say to him, are we also blind? And Jesus responds in verse 41, he says, if you were blind, you would have no guilt, but now that you say we see, your guilt remains. So Jesus basically says, yep, I'm talking about you. You claim to see, but you actually don't. So yes, you are blind and you are guilty. This phrase at the beginning of verse 41 could be a little confusing. He says, if you were blind, you would have no guilt. He's not saying you would be innocent. And so if somebody never hears about Jesus, it's not what he's getting at. Romans 1 actually talks to us about how God is revealed even in creation. The beauty of creation, the wonder of it all. God can be seen, God can be known, and God can be sought. And so all people are without excuse. Right? And at the end of the day, we trust in a sovereign, just God. So what is he getting at here? I think what Jesus is saying, he's talking about the guilt of these people who are literally looking at and listening to the Son of God. But instead of worship, which should be their response, what do? They go to war. They're going to war against Jesus. They're trying to trap him in his words. In the previous chapter, they were trying to stone him to death. In the next chapter, they're going to try to arrest him. And they just keep coming after him. It's the opposite response. They are blind, and they remain in their guilt, and they are without excuse. Instead of worshiping the king, they go to war. It's the wrong response when the sign gets revealed. It's like when if you ever go to Bagel Bakery, a little coffee bagel joint around the corner. You walk in, and the coffee bar is out, right? And just like at Panera or some other place, you go get a soda. That usually means it's free refills. And so you go in, get your bagel, you get your coffee, and then you fill your coffee up and you want to refill, you can go get some more. But there's this little sign in between two crafts that say refills cost 75 cents. And all that money goes to the people who help make the coffee beans, something like that. It's this little sign. You might think the refills are free, but they're not. When you see the sign, what happens? Hopefully your conscience pricks you and you say, oh, I can't get any more free refills because they're not actually free. I'm supposed to be paying for this. And so you say, well, I need to either not refill my cup or pay the 75 cents or put $1 in there and refill it. Now, if you see the sign and you say, I mean, nobody's monitoring it, really. You could go get all the coffee you want. You could probably bring your own mugs in there, and they're not really going to notice it. They're not paying attention. You say, well, that's fine. Nobody's going to catch me. Or you could justify it. You say, well, I already paid for a bagel, and I already paid for some coffee. It's not costing them anything, right? There's plenty of ways to do it, and then just ignore that sign. That's what's happening here. Jesus is here. He's the sign. And he's saying, here I am, here I am. And they're like, nah, I don't think so. Jesus says, well, you're actually blind then. You can't see, and your guilt remains on you. Can you see, or are you blind? Can you see that Jesus is the Son of Man and believe in him? Or have you rejected him? If you do not believe, it means your guilt remains. You are still in your sin. It is only by the blood of Jesus that someone can be cleansed of their sin and forgiven. And sadly, what we see is hearts that do not believe get harder and harder. You might say eyes that are blind, if possible, get blinder and blinder. Right? The more you hear and the more you continue to reject. So it seems like what happens in the people that oppose Jesus, it just gets worse and worse and worse. Worship of Jesus is a good indicator. If your life does not worship Jesus, I would ask you, why not? He has revealed himself to you. And even in this story, we see some of the wonder of Jesus. He's the catalyst in all this story. Or we go back and read chapter 6, Jesus initiates with this man. Him and his disciples start having a conversation, and then Jesus makes the mud and heals him. There's no indication that this man is like some of the other people that were crying out and seeking Jesus out. Jesus initiates with this man. Jesus heals this man. Now Jesus comes and finds the man. Right? I love that. In verse 37, Jesus hears that they cast him out, and he goes to find him. And then Jesus reveals himself. He says, I am the Son of Man that you would believe. If you're here today and you don't believe, I think Jesus is drawing you. Jesus is drawing you. You being here today is a sign that he is seeking you out and he's calling you. You know, Jesus is in the people finding business. This is what he says in Luke 19. The Son of Man, sound familiar? The Son of Man came to seek and save the lost. Jesus is not a part of some grand scheme of God, some big angry guy in the sky who just wants to send all people to hell. Jesus is seeking and saving the lost. And if you do not trust in him, he's after you and he wants you to find life and freedom in his name. He is asking you this same question that he asks this man here. Do you believe in the Son of Man? Tell him. Say, yes, Lord, I believe, and then worship him. If you say, yes, I do believe, it means your guilt is covered. Your guilt is covered. And we worship Jesus for all of our life. That is the only right and true response.